Hello everyone. So lighting setup today and everything not quite as desirable as I should like. It's lashing out today and it'll probably affect the sound of this recording as well because busy road out there and lots of water and rain and so on. So I wanted to cover today something that kind of came up in the comments sort of one of my previous videos, whichever video it was, I can't remember. I had mentioned in the video that I use tarot decks in a particular manner for the purpose of bibliomancy, and that if people were interested, I could cover how I do that. So that's what this video is, tarot and bibliomancy, with a good side helping of my absolute adoration for the Earthsea books. So strap in, I suppose, for some bookish, fantasy-ish, cartomancy nerdery. A sip of my tea, which is a little cold because it took me a little while to figure out how to set up the camera with this kind of lighting. And forgive the room around me, I'm kind of rearranging the art a bit, so it's a little, I think the balance is maybe a little off. But anyway, my tea is peppermint with a bit of nettle steeped in and a tiny little bit of honey. So. Okay, so I recently, in thinking about this, went and checked through my own sort of manuscript page, explaining to myself about how to do this, and I decided to revamp the page. I'm in the middle of working on a sort of kind of a Book of Shadows / sketchbook for a particular project, art book, whatever you want to call it. So I've been putting new versions of my own various bits and pieces in here, and then also doing kind of sketches in and around those pages. I haven't put too much in it at the moment because I literally only started it the other day. It's got loads of drawings, of really, really old drawings of mine at the other side, so I flipped the book around and upside down to be able to reuse it, and I'm probably going to gesso over a lot of those old pages. Anyway, my new bibliomancy page is here. Can't really see it very well. Ooh. You can see stars at the top, nice silver work and other such things at the bottom. And I'll show an image on the screen to kind of give you an idea of what this actually is. But effectively, the original idea for this actually came from my partner, who he's not a mathy person by any stretch of the imagination, but being able to do almost any math at all automatically makes you a better mathematician than I am. And so I was at one point sitting down with a deck and trying to see if there was a way that I could adapt a tarot deck to the omnibus edition of the Earthsea books, because the Earthsea books are my sacred text outside of actual, say, Irish mythological material or medieval literature from specific places and cultures. So I wanted to see if I could figure out a way to use tarot to help choose pages. The reason I wanted to do that is because I know all 6 books and the added story material that's included at the tail end of this actual volume, and so on and so forth. I know them all too well that I was realizing that I couldn't, before I would even look at what page, I would kind of know where I was and what material I was about to read in the Earthsea sort of lexicon, as it were, the Earthsea collection of stories and novels and so on. Which you can imagine makes it so that even as you're sort of fanning your finger through the pages, you end up just sort of knowing where you're stopping, which didn't feel very random to me. It just felt really frustrating in the end. I also found that it seemed impractical because if you're working with an entire volume and you care about the entire volume and you're fanning your finger through, at what percentage of that time are you kind of randomly stopping at the very, very either end of that volume, at the very beginning or at the very end? Your thumb probably is going to want to drift toward somewhere in the middle of the book. So again, maybe people have other methods of dealing with this, but I was sitting there trying to think through how would I use the tarot to kind of better randomize my experience of bibliomancy, but then on top of that, bring in my tarot practice, because as I've often said on this channel, I'm a visual thinker, and I also really like all of my practices and things to kind of be mix-aroundable with each other. I don't like them to be so separate and so on. I like to have the categories sort of like layer on top of each other. So I was talking to my partner about this, and he said, well, why wouldn't you do it in terms of a percentage? And I was like, but there's 78. And he's like, well, do it this way. So here's what we came up with. And I'll read what I have here, but I will also show it on the screen. So it says, Tarot for Bibliomancy, Books of Earthsea. Now, before I actually get going with this, you will notice that the number of pages in this volume is pretty close to being really convenient. You'll see I've had to do a little bit of zhuzhing here and there, but for the most part, it's actually a really nice big volume, so that makes it a little bit easier to work with the divisions within tarot and so on. But as you'll see, I did actually also make a few adjustments, and anyone who has any understanding of math or can talk to someone who does, but also someone who might have more than one sacred text can find various ways to like see if the ways you can divide up the tarot will work for different numbers of pages depending on what your sacred texts or your books of preference are. Okay, so I have this divided into 3 sections here: mechanics, number of digits, and divinatory page number. So it says underneath mechanics, all cards may be used with the exception of the Fool, the World, and the Courts. The pages of the Omnibus Earthsea books, including added short stories and historical material, number just short of 1,000 pages, with the page distribution occurring thus. 1 through 9 occupies approximately 1% of 1,000 pages. 10 through 99 occupies approximately 9% of 1,000 pages. And 100 through 999 occupies approximately 90%. So if you can kind of see where this is headed, the aim is to use the numbers that are on the cards or loose number associations to kind of signify not only the page number, but also how we will determine where within the book the tarot will direct us. So, number of digits. To determine how many digits your resulting page number will have, shuffle and draw a card. A card numbered 1 signifies a page number of 1 or 2 digits. That is, 10% of the cards numbered 1 through 10 is also the same as 10% of 1,000 pages. A card numbered 2 through 10 signifies a page number of 3 digits, that being that 90% of the cards that are numbered between 1 and 10 is 90% of 1,000 pages. If, in the first instance, the card drawn indicates 1 or 2 digits, shuffle and draw again. A card numbered 1 signifies 1 digit. A card numbered 2 through 9 signifies 2 digits. As the same laws of proportion apply, 1 signifies 1% of pages 0 through 99. 2 through 9 signifies 90% of pages numbered 0 through 99. So, and then the last section says divinatory page number. Upon determination of the number of digits assigned to your divinatory page number, so now we know it'll be, anywhere between 1 and 3 cards, reshuffle the entire deck with the exceptions noted above and draw the corresponding number of cards, being 1, 2, or 3. Cards numbered 1 through 9 signify numbers 1 through 9. Cards numbered 10 signify 0. So as I have very botchily explained here, the idea is that we are functioning in terms of the number of cards we have in the deck. We're functioning with only the cards that can be divvied up into groups of 10. If we take out the Fool and the World, and we take out the Court cards, that means there are kind of 6 groups of 10 cards, thereby making it much more statistically even between which numbers will show up or not, as in the case of the World card, kind of giving preferential treatment to a certain type of number. So you will note here, sort of by implication, that what I'm doing with cards 11 through 20, depending on your system, strength or justice, all the way up to judgment, is I'm treating them as another 1 through 10 cycle. Okay. Whew. Now, I'm going to demonstrate how this works because chances are I've left you very confused with that explanation. I've certainly confused myself multiple times over. it makes a lot more sense in practice. Okay, so I'm going to demonstrate how this works using 2 decks to kind of show various ways of doing it. I will discuss a 3rd deck, and when the page number, the resulting page number comes up, I will read a passage from the book, not necessarily a whole page. Normally what I would do is read then several pages from that starting point, depending on my mood. But I will try to avoid any massive spoilers, but please bear in mind, those of you who are watching who have not read these books yet, that there are 6 full books and added short stories. So, you know, things like if a character seems to be still alive in a later book and you haven't gotten there yet, like, please bear with me on that one. But I will try to steer clear of anything that's too obviously a spoiler. And one other thing that I want to say before I get started with this is that I often do this when I've already done a reading for myself on a given topic. Sometimes I'll look at the cards in front of me and realize that they work out quite well to a given page number. You know, there's no, quartz in the reading or something like that. And sometimes I'll just pretend the quartz not there, or do various other numerological things to get a number and then go see what page that is. And so you can do this kind of in reverse direction as well, where you already have a reading in front of you, but then the idea being that reading indicates a page within your set of chosen sacred texts. So that's also part of the whole point here, is that I wanted the system to be reflexive, in addition to reflective. So you would have your deck, you would be thinking over a question, mulling over a question, or even just desirous of a given passage on a given day, but not wanting to pick one too overtly, and you start to shuffle. I will note that the reason I'm using this deck right now as well is that I have taken out the court cards and the Fool and the World. I'll show you in a minute, but normally I wouldn't even do that. I would just work around. Okay. So drawing the first card, we have the 3 of Pentacles. So what you'll notice is that because picking a card that would indicate numbers below 100 at this first stage means that you have to have a card that has a digit corresponding to 1, there's obviously a certain percentage of the time that's much larger that's going to be when you get this first round, and then you can proceed directly to getting your page number. If I were to get a card that signifies, the next card, if I were to get something like the Magician that signifies the number 1, that tells me that I would need to then determine whether that's a single digit number, 1 through 9 in terms of page numbers, or a double digit number, 10 through 99. So let's pretend I got that Magician real quick, do another quick shuffle. Eight of Wands. So it would be a double digit number. Okay, so now we're going to run through an actual demonstration of how this would work. As I hope I mentioned already, I did take the quartz out of this deck and the Fool and the World. Normally I would not be so fussed about that. And if in the choosing of 3 cards, the first card happens to be a 10 of some kind, which in this system represents or signifies a 0, I would just immediately pick whatever the next card is. Because if you imagine, say, a 10 of Pentacles, a 7 of Wands, and a 6 of Cups, you would have 076. That's 76, which is 2 digits, not 3 digits, so you just immediately move on. Again, it's not a perfect system. It's meant more to involve the tarot in the process of equalizing your own sort of unintended biases. Again, perhaps with Bibliomancy that's what you want, but it's not what I want, so. Okay, so 3 cards. We have Death. Arcana number 13. In this case, that signifies the number 3. We have the Moon, Arcana number 18. which in this case signifies 8. And we have the 10 of Cups, which in this case signifies 0. So, 380, page 380. Let's see what we got. Oh, very interesting. So the interesting thing about using this volume is that with the illustrated pages, sometimes you land on an illustrated spread. Wow. So this is one of Charles Vess's illustrations for this book. I will note that I'm not the biggest Charles Vess fan, but I do find some of the illustrations in this really beautiful. I did buy it more because it's a single collected volume rather than for his illustrations. So in this case, this would involve me often at the altar kind of using this as a meditative spread. In a situation like this where this here is page 380, I would actually just look at the entire image. Or I might just sort of wander around in the image and I might start from here and progress like I'm reading and so on and so forth. But that's how I would do that example. Okay, so now I'm going to use my Rider-Waite-Smith to illustrate how I would do this if I'm not bothering to take any particular cards out of the deck. Does that lend preference to any given number or not? I don't think so anyway, because the whole point is that it's randomized and that certain numbers are just not, certain cards are just not functioning within this system. So the chance of certain things coming up should, at least to my mind, still be equalized. And again, this is much less formal in terms of how smooth it looks or feels. Usually I'm in sort of tarot question asking mood, or I'm in sacred space, or I'm mulling over something that I've been going through, or a certain magical thing, and I'm sort of seeking for a good indication of what direction to go in, and I'll be shuffling the cards as if to do a reading anyway. I can't always be bothered to grab whatever deck I want to use and then immediately take out all the cards. Sometimes you just have to go with the flow. So in that scenario, I kind of just work around whatever cards come up that don't make sense within the system, and I may actually note which ones they are depending on the circumstances and kind of work that in then to my understanding of what page comes up. As you will kind of readily comprehend, I hope, that depending on what cards you get and the way that relates to the page, you can then also look at the cards as if it's its own reading and extrapolate that with the page, almost as if the book itself becomes a guidebook to the deck. Okay, so the first card is the World. In this instance, I would just move on because I'm determining how many digits at the moment. The next card is the Eight of Pentacles, so we have a 3-digit number. Time to shuffle again. King of Swords, I just move on. Okay, we have the Four of Wands. So our first digit is a 4. We have the Six of Pentacles. So the second digit is a 6. And we have the 10 of Pentacles. So the last digit in this situation would be a 0. 460, page 460. Okay, this is a section from chapter 8 of Tehanu, and the chapter title is called Hawks. Page 460 is the first page of the chapter. Theru was back soon with Sparrowhawk's reply. He said he'll leave tonight. Tenar heard this with satisfaction, relieved that he had accepted her plan, that he would get clear away from these messengers and messages he dreaded. It was not till she had fed Heather and Theru their frog leg feast, and put Pharaoh to bed and sung to her, and was sitting up alone without lamp or firelight that her heart began to sink. He was gone. He was not strong. He was bewildered and uncertain. He needed friends, and she had sent him away from those who were and those who wished to be his friends. He was gone, and she must stay, to keep the hounds from his trail, to learn at least whether they stayed in Gaunt or sailed back to Havnor. His panic and her obedience to it began to seem so unreasonable to her that she thought it equally unreasonable, improbable, that he would in fact go. He would use his wits and simply hide in Moss's house, which was the last place in all Earthsea that a king would look for an archmage. It would be much better if he stayed there till the king's men left. Then he would come back here to Ogion's house where he belonged, and it would go on as before, she looking after him until he had his strength back, and he giving her his dear companionship. A shadow against the stars in the doorway. Hist! Awake! Auntie Moss came in. Well, he's off, she said, conspiratorial and jubilant. Went the old forest road, says he'll cut down to the middle valley way, along past Oak Springs tomorrow. Good, said Kennar. Bolder than usual, Moss sat down uninvited. I gave him a loaf and a bit of cheese for the way. Thank you, Moss. That was kind. Mistress Goha, Moss's voice in the darkness took on the sing-song resonance of her chanting and spell-casting. There's a thing I was wanting to say to you, dearie, without going beyond what I can now, for I know you've lived among great folks and been one of them yourself, and that seals my mouth when I think of it. And yet there's things I know that you've had no way of knowing, for all the learning of the runes and the old speech, and all you've learned from the wise and in the foreign lands. That's so, Moss. That's basically the end of that page. So you can see how this kind of works. It gives you a page, you end up using sort of numerology to loosely kind of find it. It works much better in the flow of the moment. I've found that trying to explain it is actually incredibly difficult. So the entire point here really is that the world is your oyster in terms of making the deck work for whatever number of pages you have, whatever number of cards you're willing to use, depending on the number of pages or the system of books you might want to use, or whatever, even a set of chapters or something. You could just use the major arcana cards. If you want to only use a certain segment of a book on any given day, say you're working through something cyclically, you could use a certain number of cards to indicate that. This is just the sort of workable solution that I've come up with for this particular volume. The added thing that I've done is, I think in terms of actual numbered pages, there's something like 992 or 93 in this book. So what I've done is, since there is the map of Earthsea at the beginning and so on, there are certain of the front pages prior to the beginning of the introduction and then the introduction itself, where I've penciled in a very tiny number, which are the ones that do not show up, that are actually numbered in the book. And what that actually does for me in this very lucky instance is bring it to 999, and allows me to use more of the actual complete volume, including Ursula K. Le Guin's various afterwords with the books, the sort of introduction that she writes, and some of the other thoughts and the archival and historical materials that she includes in it. The last thing I want to say for now is that I do have a deck that I often think of as my Earthsea deck, even though it's not like a match in the sense that, like, ideologically it feels like a match, but visually it makes me think of Earthsea. I think in some ways it's the sort of ochre, earthy colors of the deck, but also very distinctly it's because of a specific card. So the deck is the Solara Occulto, and the card is the Three of Wands, where you have this woman high up looking over the waters with mountains in the distance and the ships sailing on the water. And she's got this very long, plain, dark hair. And fundamentally that makes me think of Tenar on Gaunt. But it also makes me think of Theru. And it also makes me think of the Daughter of Audren, which is very, very dark and terrifying. So there you have it. Just trying to think, is that everything I wanted to say? Let me know if this made any sense. I've been finding it, possibly because of the numbers and math, really difficult to actually explain out loud. I've had to kind of do multiple takes when I realized that I just went and said the wrong number and didn't pick up on it until later. In case you can't tell, and I definitely already said it, I suck at math, and I suck at even being able to conceptualize numbers on their own very well. So I'm just trying to think if there's anything else I forgot to cover. I don't think so. Anyway, leave a message in the comments saying whether or not this made sense to you, whether or not you feel it's adaptable to some of your own favorite sacred texts, how you would consider doing that. Do you do something similar already, and so on? I'd be really, really curious to know. So with all of those words said, I hope everyone's well and taking care of themselves and happy and content to whatever extent they so wish. And I'll see you next time. Bye.